Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. May is Family Month in Korea, marked by Children's Day on May 5th and Parents' Day on May 8th, a time when the focus naturally turns to family and the future. And this year, there are some cautiously positive signs, with births rising for more than a year and recent increases hitting record levels. But experts warn this may be less of a true turnaround and more of a temporary effect driven by delayed marriages and catch-up births after the pandemic. Now, at the same time, deeper challenges still remain, from job insecurity and housing costs to the difficulty of balancing work and family life. And with a rapidly aging already underway, the question now is whether this rebound can last and what needs to change to sustain this. And for answers to this, we connect to Hwang Myung-jin, professor of the public administration at Korea University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Choi Hyun-sun, professor of public administration at Myeongji University. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you. Thank you.
So let's start our discussion with Professor Hwang first. So, like I've said, births have been rising for more than a year with record increases in recent months. How should we interpret this trend? And do you think it's a genuine turning point to say?
Well, it's a good sign. So I would be optimistic, but with one condition: we have to be cautiously looking at this phenomena and social indicator. So I would say that we have not fully reaching out the turning point yet. The rise in the birth is meaningful because it shows that the desire to marriage and the children has not disappeared yet. Many young Koreans are not simply rejecting the family life, family value. Rather, many of them have been delaying marriage and childbirth because the conditions were too difficult. Some of the recent increases may come from the delayed marriage and, of course, the delayed birth after the pandemic period. Some may also have come from the fact that women in the early 30s, who are now the main childbearing age group in Korea, are still relatively large in number. The policy support may also have helped, especially parental leaves and child care support and flexible work. But a true turning point requires more than 1 or 2 years of increase. We need to see whether this trend continues. We also need to see whether the second and third births recover, not only first birth. And more importantly, we need to see whether young people feel more secure about job, housing, and income, and child care.
Right. So the numbers look really encouraging on the surface, but we really have to see how much this would last moving forward. Now, when we look beneath the surface, like we've said, some people say much of this rebound is driven by delayed marriages and catch-up births. Professor Choi, what does that reveal about the deeper structural issues facing young people these days?
I think that this suggests the core problem is still there. It means that many young Koreans still see the marriage and the parenthood as a financially risky and socially burdensome. The high housing cost, job insecurity, intense education pressure, and unequal care, especially for women, so that kind of issue remains a major structural barriers. So the rebound is increasing, but it may be temporary unless those deeper structural issue improve.
Now, as our Professor Hwang has touched upon a while ago, beyond this short-term trend, the number of women in their early 30s is expected to peak, and then, of course, it would decline naturally. How significant do you think this demographic shift is for Korea's birth outlook going forward?
Well, we talk about the most important demographic issues. The number of the childbearing ages, which is 30s, and birth depends on two things. One is how many children each woman has, each woman. The other is how many women are in the main childbearing age group. Even if the fertility rate rises a little, as is now, the total number of the births can fall if the number of women in the early 30s decline. This is why the current moment is very important for Korean and the population figure in general. Korea may have a short window opportunity, as I say. Right now, there are still many women in the main childbearing age group, but after this group peaks and start to shrink, it will become much harder to increase the total number of births. This means that the policy must move quickly and fast. We cannot wait until the population structure becomes even weaker. If Korea wants to turn this short-term rebound into long-term recovery, it must improve the condition of its marriage child and the overall living condition for the younger population.
So the childbearing population itself is very important, but the number of babies that each woman actually would have to give birth to is also very important, we're saying. Now, at the same time, well, first births are actually increasing. Second and third births by a single mother are actually declining, we're seeing. Professor Che, what does this tell us about the economic burden and the risks that families actually perceive when considering additional children?
Yes, in the latest data showing that first birth rose strongly, second birth may be in the moderate, but the third and above continue to decline. So the pattern suggests that a similar underlying message. Many couples, our young couples, may be willing to have one child, but second is okay. But third and additional child may be sharply increasing the financial strain and career disruptions, and many caregiving the pressures. So maybe for families, it is not just about one child and another child cost of the raising. Maybe 3 or 4 children mean it is a cumulative burden. For example, the housing size, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 children, maybe the family should have a more bigger 3 or 4 rooms housing. Also private education expense and the childcare availability. And those things is make young generation think about how we can manage it. So it is about the risk management issue for young couples, but we must solve that structural barriers for them.
Right. So the real challenge is not just about having one first child, but how much people are willing to expand their families as well. And of course, policies play a big role in this. Recent measures we're seeing have expanded parental leave and benefits and also offered some flexible work arrangements. Professor Hwang, which of these have had the most tangible impact so far?
Well, in terms of the policies, the provisions, I would say the parental leave and the flexible work arrangement are likely to have the most direct impact, especially when the workers are actually are using them. The cash benefits are very helpful, but they are not enough by themselves. One-time payment cannot absorb any long-term burden of raising a child. What matters more is whether the parents can keep their jobs, protect their careers, and still have time to care for their children. In this sense, paid parental leave is important. It reduces fear of losing job or losing the more importantly career track. Flexible work is also important because the parents need time. Not only money, the child care support also matters because it reduces the daily pressures for family. But there's a more serious problem. This policy can also work better for people in the large company, the public sector, or stable job holders. They're much harder to use for workers in the small firms and temporary job and self-employment or the platform work. So the real test is not whether Korea has a good policy on paper. The real test is whether the ordinary worker can use them without much fear and anxiety.
Right. The more people who are able to enjoy these benefits would be really helpful in, actually raising the nation's birth rate as well. But speaking of which, fundamentally, Professor Che, what are the key structural barriers in areas like jobs, housing, and income stability that really need to be addressed to sustain this trend?
Many experts keep pointing to the labor market reform and housing affordability and the childcare support and the gender equality for sustaining the fertility rebound. For example, young people face the job insecurity issue. They have many temporary jobs, but not the secured job. They have a long working hours, and they have a very steep work-family trade-off, which making them very difficult to decide to have a child. Also, housing is another major obstacle. High housing costs and difficulty securing stable housing delay the marriage and childbearing. On the top of that, the many families still worry about cost of the child care and the private education. So those problems keep our young generation having the family and baby. Also, the income instability is a matters. It matters. So many young adults do not want to have higher wages, but they have predictive earnings and the career continuity. So maybe job security and then the income security is a very important issue for them.
Right, definitely. So bigger structural measures would definitely be important at this point. But when we step back a little bit, so South Korea, we're saying it's entering a phase where low birth rates are evident and also rapid aging are actually happening simultaneously. Professor Hwang, what kind of overarching population strategy is actually needed at this point?
Well, in terms of the low fertility is a problem, phenomenon and reason, and also the policies Professor Che delivered very accurately. If we move our topic into aging society, Korea is most rapidly aging society. Each year we have additional number of elderly people, and this means that we are losing the talented old folks, but increasing more of the social welfare recipients. That increases the burden of the financial burden on the pension plan and long-term care, as well as the healthcare, the budget. What we have to see is there's a connection between the low fertility and aging society, the family and community. When government is looking at what you call the financial support and provision and the structured delivery, the social welfare delivery system, what we are seriously lacking of is our vision on the shrinking the family's influence and values and the community as well. So Korea's population strategy should not be only about asking people to have more babies, of course not, and it should be more building a society with a family life, work and aging can exist together in a substantial way.
So it's not really just about low birth rates, a much broader demographic shift we're seeing. Now, speaking of which, Professor Che, as this working age population really declines, how exactly is this already affecting Korea's labor market and the long-term growth potential as well?
Yeah, I think as the Professor Hwang pointed out, the aging in Korea is very serious and it could increase very fast. So it is already affecting the labor market and the economy. So Korea's working age population shrinking since 2018. According to the OECD data, Korea will have a sharpest democratic squeeze with its working age population project to decline by up to 46% between the 2023 and 2060s. So this is a big challenge to maybe Korea's Koreans' economic growth in the long term. So I think that the number of workforce, the Bank of Korea has warned that potential growth could fall to around 0.6% by the late 2040s. So the message is clear. Demographic decline is no longer just a future problem. It is already reshaping current the Korean's labor market and affecting economic growth right now.
Right. It definitely is a very serious concern that this working age population is continuing to decline as the years go by. Now, at the same time, like we've been touching upon, pension and healthcare spending are projected to rise dramatically. Professor Hwang, how urgent do you think is a reform in this area?
Well, we have 10 million elderly people as of 2025, and we have a national pension plan which covers half of the elderly people. So the rest of half could not have a solid, reliable, regular income resources. So that is one of the most important problem of current pension plans. So I would suggest reform must be taken immediately. There are three directions I can think of. First is Korea needs to improve the financial stability. That may require the gradual change in contribution rate and benefit levels and retirement rules. Second, Korea must protect older people from poverty. About 40% of the people elderly people are under the poverty line. Korea still has a serious problem of old age poverty in that nature. So the reform should not simply cut the benefit or increase the contribution, but we have to cover the about half of the uncovered pension recipients. Thirdly, the pension system and the labor market must be linked together. If people are expected to receive the pension later, and they must also have a real chance to work longer in decent job. Healthcare reform is also important. I would not extend it to too much of these things because they are interlinked together. The real question is whether Korea can spend money on aging, rather than the more important question whether Korea can redesign the system before the pressure becomes too large. The current system was established in the late 80s and 90s. It's been, good 40, 50 years ever since that. We really need to redesign the whole system.
Right, a definite redesigning of the whole system was definitely necessary at this point. But Professor Hwang, could you just elaborate a little bit more on the linking of the pension and the labor area? I just want to.
Well, labor market, if we can support the laborers in stable job and temporary position, if they are joining the pension system, I say that half of the laborers are not really in the system. So the government may support employers for their workers to contribute the pension plan, and then later it will actually pay out the money for the current retired people. Also, they will be the beneficiary in the later, and in the meantime, it will decreases spending of the healthcare, because in the most healthcare spending is on the elderly people's what do you call that what do you call that the long term the disease and the care. All right.
Right. So we have to stabilize the labor conditions in order for this pension reform to happen. Now, finally, as aging accelerates and the workforce shrinks, Professor Che, how should Korea actually redesign its labor market to better integrate elder workers?
I think maybe Korea needs to redesign the labor market more longer and better. and the more flexible working lives, which means the maybe effective the retirement there is, also re-employment opportunities there is. Okay. So I think there are maybe three important issues. First is Korea needs more flexible wage and employment system. So firms the willing to retain and rehire all the workers. And second, it needs a large-scale vocational training, especially as technology, for example, AI, changes many jobs. Third, it needs a better quality part-time and paid retirement and the mid-career transition jobs. The OECD actually pointed out the Korean labor market needs to more flexible and the vocational training more. We need to have a large scale the vocational training to support all the workers. So I think in the bottom line, we need to change some the reform, some the many fields, but at the same time, it should be guaranteed a more distant, stable, productive job, not the temporary bridging jobs.
Right. So in the end, it really comes down to how Korea adapts its labor market and society to these demographic changes going forward. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Che.
Thank you.
And of course, Professor Hwang, we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I want to make a quick announcement. In the May 14th, in the KDI in Sejong City, we'll have an annual Population Societies conference. Everybody is welcome, especially for those who are interested in the population change and demographic social reaction.
Okay, thank you for that information. We'll take note of that. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion at this point. That'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.